What you do at 1000 p.m. may trigger a heart attack after 50. Stop right there. Before you do anything else, I need you to do one thing. Put your hand on your chest. Feel that heartbeat. That muscle has been beating every single second of your life without a break. It doesn't rest. It doesn't get tired of the job. It doesn't ask for a pause. And right now, tonight, between 1000 p.m. and 6 a.m., it's going to face conditions that most people over 50 are completely unprepared for. You've been told sleep is when your body heals. In many ways, that's true. But your heart, your cardiovascular system does not simply shut down and coast through the night. What actually happens inside your body during those 8 hours is far more complex, far more active, and far more dangerous than anyone ever took the time to explain to you. And what you do in the 60 to 90 minutes before you close your eyes can either protect your heart during the most vulnerable window of the day or silently push it toward the edge. I'm Dr. Megan Foster. I've spent more than 2 decades in surgical practice. I've been in operating rooms at 2 a.m., responding to heart attacks and strokes that began while someone was sleeping. I've spoken to families in waiting rooms who had absolutely no idea anything was wrong. Their person went to bed fine. They didn't wake up. And I've spent years studying the research that explains exactly why these events happen when they do, and what specific everyday behaviors consistently appear in the hours before them. Today, I'm going to give you that information clearly, practically, and completely. No exaggeration, no fear tactics. Just the real picture of what your heart is doing at night, what puts it at risk, and exactly what you can do about it. Starting tonight, this is going to take some time. I'm going to go deep on this because you deserve more than a surface-level list. Stay with me. What I'm sharing in the next 40-some minutes could genuinely be one of the most important things you watch this year. Let's start at the very foundation, because before we can talk about what goes wrong, you need to understand what right looks like. What is your heart actually supposed to do while you sleep? Most people imagine the sleeping heart like a car engine idling, ticking over quietly, barely working, just maintaining. That picture is completely wrong, and I want to correct it right now because understanding what normal looks like is the only way to recognize when something is off. Your heart during sleep is dynamic. It is actively shifting. It is responding to signals from your brain, your lungs, your hormonal system, and your physical environment all at the same time all night long. Sleep is not a flat line. It is a series of distinct biological stages, each with its own cardiovascular signature. In the first hour or two after you fall asleep, your body shifts into rest and recovery mode. Your heart rate drops. Your blood pressure falls usually by 10 to 20% compared to daytime levels. Your body temperature lowers. This is when your heart gets a genuine window of reduced load. But that window doesn't last. Around 90 minutes in, you enter your first REM cycle, the dreaming stage. During REM, heart rate and blood pressure become irregular and can spike suddenly. Your breathing turns shallow. Your brain is nearly as active as when you're awake. And this cycle of cardiovascular turbulence repeats every 90 minutes all night, with each REM period growing longer. By 5 or 6 a.m., a single REM cycle can last close to an hour, a long window of instability. And then comes the morning cortisol surge. Starting around 4 a.m., your adrenal glands release cortisol to prepare your body for waking. Cortisol raises blood pressure, increases heart rate, activates inflammation pathways, and critically activates blood clotting factors. The proteins that seal wounds become more concentrated and more active in this window. This is why heart attacks and strokes cluster disproportionately between 6 and 10 a.m. Blood pressure is at its daily peak. Blood is at its most prone to clotting. Any existing weakness in the arterial system is most likely to be exposed right here. Think of it this way. Your heart is climbing a steep hill every single morning regardless of what you do. The question is whether it starts that climb rested and stable or exhausted, overstrained, and already under pressure from the night before. The habits we're going to discuss are what determine the answer to that question. Now, before we get into the habits, I need to give you one more piece of foundational information because without it, the habits won't make complete sense. After the age of 50, your cardiovascular system undergoes changes that are gradual, quiet, and almost universally underestimated. Your arteries begin to lose their natural flexibility. When you were young, they stretched and recoiled with every heartbeat like new rubber tubing, absorbing the force of each beat and distributing blood smoothly. As we age, the elastic fibers inside the arterial wall break down and are replaced by stiffer collagen fibers. Your arteries behave less like flexible hose and more like rigid pipe. Rigid pipe cannot absorb pressure. Every overnight blood pressure spike hits the arterial wall with greater mechanical force than it would have 20 years ago. The inner lining of your arteries, a thin active layer called the endothelium, also changes. It releases fewer protective chemicals and more inflammatory ones. It responds more slowly to pressure changes, and it becomes more vulnerable to injury. Then there's plaque. Arterial plaque builds silently for decades before causing any symptoms. By the time most people are in their 50s, some degree of plaque is already present in the coronary arteries, the vessels supplying blood to the heart muscle. Most of the time, this causes no obvious problems, but some plaque is structurally unstable. Under the right triggering conditions, it can rupture, tear away from the wall. When it does, the body immediately sends clotting factors to seal the site. That clot can form fast enough to block the artery completely. No blood reaches the heart muscle beyond that point. That is a heart attack. Not from the plaque itself, from the clot that forms in response to its rupture. The conditions that trigger plaque rupture include elevated blood pressure, inflammation, increased clotting tendency, and sudden hormonal surges. Every one of those conditions peaks in the early morning hours, which is exactly why overnight habits are not abstract health advice. They directly shape the conditions under which that specific event becomes more or less likely. One more concept before the list. Blood viscosity, how thick your blood is, changes constantly based on hydration, diet, temperature, and hormones. During sleep, blood naturally becomes somewhat thicker from reduced fluid intake and hormonal shifts. Thicker blood is harder to pump, generates more arterial wall pressure, and clots more readily. This natural overnight thickening is manageable in a healthy system, but compounded by dehydration, alcohol, and the morning cortisol surge, it becomes a genuine risk factor. This is the landscape your heart is navigating every night. Now you have the full picture. And now the habits we're about to discuss will make complete sense, not just as rules, but as real physiological interventions. Let's go through them. We're starting at 7 and working toward the most dangerous, number 7. And this one surprises almost everyone because it has nothing to do with food, alcohol, or anything that most people think of as a heart health issue. Sleeping with your phone in the bedroom. Before I explain this, I want to be clear about what this is not about. This is not primarily about electromagnetic radiation from the device. That concern is often overstated. What this is about is a hormone called melatonin, and understanding what melatonin actually does will change the way you think about your phone at night permanently. Melatonin is produced by a small gland in your brain called the pineal gland. Most people know it as a sleep hormone, but its role in your body goes far beyond drowsiness. Melatonin actively lowers blood pressure. It directly reduces cortisol. It suppresses the inflammatory signaling pathways in your arteries. It acts as an antioxidant, protecting arterial wall cells from oxidative damage that promotes plaque development. Melatonin is one of your body's most important overnight cardiovascular protective hormones, and it is exquisitely sensitive to light, specifically to the blue wavelength emitted by every phone screen, tablet, computer monitor, and LED television currently in use. Here's the specific finding I want you to hold on to. Research shows that 60 to 90 minutes of blue light exposure in the evening can suppress melatonin production for the first 3 to 4 hours of your sleep period. This is not about the light keeping you awake. You can fall asleep completely normally, but for the first several hours of sleep, your body is producing far less melatonin than it should, which means far less overnight blood pressure reduction, far less cortisol suppression, and far less arterial protection during the very hours those protections are most needed. And there's a second mechanism. Your phone, even face down on the nightstand, even on silent mode, generates what sleep researchers call microarousals. Brief partial awakenings triggered by sounds, vibrations, notification lights, or simply the subconscious awareness of the device. You may never remember these awakenings. You may not feel them, but they fragment your sleep architecture throughout the night, repeatedly pulling you out of the deeper stages where cardiovascular recovery occurs. Each microarousal triggers a brief but real spike in cortisol and blood pressure. Multiply that by a night's worth of interruptions, and the cumulative cardiovascular load is genuinely significant. The solution is simple and the only thing that fully addresses both mechanisms. The phone leaves the bedroom, not face down on the nightstand, not in your pocket. In another room entirely, on Do Not Disturb. If you use your phone as an alarm, a dedicated alarm clocks less than $10 and does the job without any of the cardiovascular risk. Additionally, ending all screen use, phone, television, tablet, at least 60 minutes before your target sleep time gives your melatonin production enough runway to begin rising before you fall asleep. During that screen-free hour, reading a physical book, having a calm conversation, light stretching, or simply sitting in dimmed lighting all support the hormonal shift your cardiovascular system needs to enter its protective overnight mode. Reading a physical book, light conversation, gentle stretching, calm music. Any of these done consistently in the 60 minutes before sleep creates a measurable hormonal shift that lowers your blood pressure, quiets your cortisol, and prepares your cardiovascular system for the protective dip it needs. This is free. It costs nothing, and its impact on overnight cardiovascular protection is real and measurable. Now, number 6, and this one challenges something most people have never once questioned: sleeping in a room that is too warm. We associate warmth with comfort, comfort with sleep, and sleep with health. So the idea that a warm bedroom might be hurting your heart sounds almost counterintuitive, but the physiology is very clear. Your core body temperature is programmed to drop during sleep. This is not incidental. It is a biological prerequisite for reaching the deeper, most restorative stages of sleep. As your core temperature falls, your heart rate slows, your blood pressure decreases, your metabolic rate drops, and your cardiovascular system genuinely enters a lower demand state. The temperature drop is the trigger. Without it, deep sleep becomes significantly harder to achieve and maintain. When your bedroom is too warm, your body cannot accomplish this temperature drop efficiently. Your blood vessels at the skin surface dilate to try to radiate heat outward. Your heart rate stays elevated to support that heat release process. You produce sweat, and sweat means fluid loss, which means your blood becomes more viscous as the night progresses, and your sleep architecture suffers. You spend less time in deep, slow-wave sleep and more time in lighter, less restorative stages. There is specific clinical research connecting warmer sleep environments to elevated nighttime blood pressure, reduced deep sleep duration, and higher morning cortisol levels, all three of which are independent cardiovascular risk factors. Not in extreme cases, in the range of temperatures most people sleep in regularly. The target range that consistently shows the best cardiovascular and sleep outcomes is between 60 and 67 degree F, or 15 to 19 degree. For most people who have been sleeping in a warmer room for years, this feels noticeably cool at first. That feeling passes quickly. Within 5 to 7 days of sleeping in a properly cooled environment, the vast majority of people report dramatically improved sleep quality, easier morning waking, and a noticeably calmer resting state. The most common mistake people make when they try this is adding heavy blankets to compensate for the cooler air. That defeats the purpose entirely. The body needs to be able to release heat through the skin. Heavy heat-trapping blankets prevent that. The right combination is a cool room around 65 degrees if you can, with light breathable bedding. Natural fabrics like cotton or bamboo allow airflow and moisture wicking far better than synthetic materials. If you share a bed with a partner who prefers warmth, this becomes a conversation worth having specifically in cardiovascular terms, because the physiological argument for a cooler room is not about preference. It is about the conditions under which your heart can actually recover overnight. Number 5, and this one is connected to almost every other risk on this list in ways that are not immediately obvious: going to bed dehydrated. The thirst mechanism in humans is a late-stage signal. By the time you feel thirsty, you are already meaningfully dehydrated. And after 50, that mechanism becomes even less reliable. It responds more slowly, signals less strongly, and is easier to misread as hunger or fatigue. Most people over 50 are in a state of mild chronic dehydration for much of their waking hours. Not dramatically dehydrated, not the kind that impairs obvious functioning, just quietly below optimal fluid levels. And that mild deficit carried into the overnight hours creates a specific cardiovascular problem. When your blood plasma volume, the liquid portion of your blood, decreases from dehydration, your blood becomes more concentrated. The red blood cells, the clotting proteins, the inflammatory markers, all of them are now in a smaller volume of liquid. Your blood is thicker. It moves with more resistance through vessels that are already less flexible after 50. Your heart works harder to push this thicker blood. And because the clotting factors are more concentrated, your blood is more prone to forming dangerous clots, particularly in the early morning hours when the cortisol surge is further activating those clotting systems. There's also a kidney connection most people don't know about. When your body detects low fluid levels, your kidneys release a hormone that signals your body to retain sodium. Sodium retention causes your body to hold water to balance it out, which increases blood volume and raises blood pressure. So dehydration triggers a hormonal cascade that quietly elevates your overnight blood pressure through an entirely separate mechanism from the blood thickening effect. Two pathways, both harmful, both operating simultaneously while you sleep. There's also something worth knowing about caffeine and hydration that many people get wrong. Coffee and tea count toward your fluid intake, but only partially. Caffeine has a mild diuretic effect, meaning it prompts your kidneys to excrete more fluid. 2 or 3 cups of coffee through the day without adequate plain water alongside can leave you meaningfully behind on hydration by early evening. And that deficit is what carries into the night. The practical solution is distributed hydration. Water with breakfast, water mid-morning, water with lunch, water in the early afternoon. Not large quantities at any single point, but a steady, consistent intake. Then a small glass 6 to 8 about 60 to 90 minutes before bed. Not right at bedtime where it risks waking you for the bathroom. Early enough to be absorbed and contribute to overnight plasma volume. Your morning mouth is your feedback mechanism. If you regularly wake up with a dry mouth or feeling dehydrated, your evening hydration is insufficient. Most people who correct their daytime hydration notice a meaningful difference in morning alertness and calmness within 3 to 5 days. Number 4, and I want to approach this one carefully because it deserves honest engagement, not dismissal. Alcohol before bed. For many people over 50, a drink in the evening is one of the consistent pleasures of the day. It marks the transition from the demands of work to something quieter and more personal. I understand that. I'm not approaching this as a morality question. I'm approaching it as a physiological one. Alcohol is metabolized by your liver at roughly 1 standard drink per hour. During that process, your liver converts alcohol into a compound called acetaldehyde, which is stimulating to the nervous system. As it builds and then clears, typically in the middle of the night, it generates what researchers call the alcohol rebound effect. Your brain, initially sedated, swings back toward alertness as the acetaldehyde clears. This is exactly why people who drink before bed often fall asleep easily, but wake between 2 and 4 a.m. unable to return to sleep. Not coincidence. Pharmacological rebound. But the sleep disruption is only part of the cardiovascular story. Alcohol causes blood vessels to dilate, initially dropping blood pressure. Your heart senses reduced resistance and increases its output to compensate. Then, as the alcohol clears, blood vessels constrict and blood pressure rebounds, often above the pre-drinking baseline. This rebound hits in the middle of the night during the hours the cardiovascular system is already most vulnerable. It generates a pressure spike against arterial walls that are stiffer, carrying plaque, and operating in a heightened clotting environment. Alcohol also directly affects the heart's electrical conduction system. Even moderate consumption can provoke irregular heart rhythms, including a well-documented phenomenon called holiday heart syndrome, occurring in people with no prior cardiac history in people over 50 with existing undiagnosed arterial changes. This electrical instability during sleep is a genuine risk. And alcohol is a diuretic. It suppresses the hormone that tells your kidneys to retain fluid, causing you to produce more urine overnight and accelerating blood thickening. The practical recommendation is timing. 3 to 4 hours between your last drink and sleep allows your liver to largely clear it, reduces the rebound effect, and allows melatonin to function. Drinking with a 6 p.m. dinner and going to bed at 10 is physiologically workable. A final drink at 9:30 and sleep at 10:30 is a genuinely different cardiovascular picture and not a favorable one. Number 3, and this sits at the intersection of nutrition, hormones, and heart health in a way that surprises most people. Eating a large, heavy meal late in the evening, your body does not process food the same way at all hours. Your digestive efficiency, insulin sensitivity, and liver function are all regulated by your internal biological clock, the circadian system that coordinates your body's processes with the cycle of day and night. During daylight hours, your metabolic machinery runs efficiently. Insulin is released in a timely, effective response. Blood sugar rises and comes back down cleanly. In the evening, and especially late evening, that efficiency declines. The same meal that your body processes smoothly at noon requires significantly more metabolic effort at 8 or 900 p.m. Insulin is slower and less effective. Blood sugar rises higher and stays elevated longer, and your liver has to handle incoming nutrients at the same time it is trying to perform its overnight maintenance work. The cardiovascular effects are specific and measurable. Blood pressure rises as circulation redirects toward the digestive system. Inflammatory signaling increases as part of the normal metabolic response to eating. And sustained elevated blood sugar, which is more common after 50 than most people realize, quietly damages the endothelium, the inner arterial lining over time. When you lie flat after a large meal, gravity no longer assists digestion. The stomach works harder. Acid reflux risk increases sharply, and acid reflux is not merely uncomfortable. The vagus nerve runs alongside the esophagus and connects directly to the heart. Esophageal acid exposure can stimulate this nerve in ways that trigger irregular heart rhythms. People who experience nighttime heart pounding after a heavy dinner often have no idea the two things are connected. High-sodium meals compound everything. Most restaurant food, takeout, and processed food contain sodium levels 2 to 4 times what a heart-protective dinner should. Sodium causes fluid retention overnight, raising blood pressure through a direct volume mechanism that persists right into the morning cortisol surge. The practical target: finish your largest meal at least 3 hours before sleep. Lighter evening meals, lean protein, vegetables, moderate carbohydrates, low sodium, are processed cleanly and leave your heart in a genuinely quieter state by midnight. If your schedule forces late eating, focus on reducing sodium and fat load in whatever you eat. Those two factors carry the most overnight cardiovascular weight. Now, we're entering the top 2, and I want to prepare you for this section because what I'm about to describe isn't just about long-term risk accumulation. These next 2 habits can create immediate, measurable, overnight cardiovascular instability, the kind you may actually be feeling and misattributing to something else entirely. If you regularly wake at 3 a.m., with your heart pounding, if you experience what feels like your heart skipping or racing in the night, if you wake with unexplained headaches, if you have night sweats that don't seem connected to room temperature, these are not random. They are not simply aging. After cardiovascular risk does not add